She scanned groceries like any other day, until a white customer slammed her receipt down and screamed, "I don't want someone like you touching my food." The store manager rushed over, but didn't defend her. He looked the black cashier in the eye and whispered, "Just go to the back." But when she pulled out her ID badge, the whole store froze. She wasn't just a cashier, she was the company's regional director. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The hum of the refrigerated units and the soft chime of the entrance bell had long become background music to Janelle Carter's mornings. Behind register 4, she moved with graceful precision, scanning items with the ease of muscle memory. Her navy blue apron was neatly pressed, her name tag centered perfectly. Janelle C. Her locks were swept into a high bun, and her dark eyes tracked every barcode, every receipt, every customer interaction with a quiet attentiveness. On the surface, she was just another cashier at Brookridge Market, but there was something about the calm firmness of her presence that made even the loudest customers lower their voices. Brookridge was an affluent suburb just outside Atlanta. Neatly trimmed hedges, Tesla-heavy parking lots, and art galleries squeezed between coffee shops. But the polished veneer couldn't mask the subtle tightness when certain people entered certain spaces. Brookridge was progressive in slogan only. "We support diversity" signs adorned storefront windows, but the deeper you looked, the more you realized those signs were less invitation, more self-defense. On this particular Thursday morning, the air was thick with summer humidity and thinly veiled tension. Janelle had just finished ringing up an elderly gentleman, who complimented her efficiency and moved on with a smile. She barely had time to greet her next customer when the storm arrived. Barbara Langley, late 50s, blazer crisp, pearls gleaming like accusations around her neck, stepped into the line. She held her Prada purse close, surveying the items in her cart with disdain. From the moment her eyes met Janelle's, her lip curled ever so slightly. "Can you get someone else?" Barbara asked, loud enough for 2 aisles over to hear. "Someone who speaks proper English." The line behind her froze. A mother with 2 kids gripped the handle of her cart a little tighter. A young black man looked up from his phone. Janelle, without flinching, completed scanning a box of almond flour and placed it in a brown paper bag. "I speak English just fine, ma'am," Janelle replied, her voice calm but not cold. Barbara's eyes narrowed. "I don't want attitude. I want a real associate, not someone." She waved her hand. In a vague, dismissive gesture, they dragged off the street for diversity points. Janelle's fingers stilled on the register keypad. She inhaled deeply through her nose, then looked directly into Barbara's face with the kind of composed power that comes from years of having to be polite while bleeding inside. "Ma'am," Janelle said, voice low and unshakable, "I am the associate assigned to this register. If you have a concern, I suggest you speak with store management." Barbara leaned forward. "Oh, I plan to. Believe me." She yanked her cart backward and stormed past the onlookers, her heels clacking like a gavel. As she made a beeline for the customer service desk, the silence behind her cracked into murmurs. A teenage employee whispered, "Did that just happen?" The young black man shook his head and muttered, "Same old Brookridge." Barbara slammed her purse on the customer service counter. Todd, the store manager, a white man in his mid-40s with thinning hair and a constant air of nerves, looked up from a spreadsheet. "I need to file a formal complaint," Barbara declared, loud enough for half the store to hear. "That woman at register 4, she's rude, she's unqualified, and frankly she doesn't even look like she works here. How do I know she didn't just walk in off the street?" Todd glanced toward the registers. When he saw who she was referring to, a visible flicker passed over his face. He stood up slowly. "Ms. Langley." Barbara didn't let him finish. "I'm a long-time customer. I spend thousands here every month, and now you're hiring people who make me uncomfortable. I asked for someone who speaks properly, and she gave me attitude. You need to do something. Get someone else up there." By now, a few more employees had gathered discreetly near the bakery display. Some were clearly uncomfortable. Others, not surprised. None intervened. Todd exhaled. "Okay, let me see what I can do." As he walked toward register 4, the walk felt like 1,000 pounds. He knew Janelle, knew her resume, knew her record, knew that behind that register stood a woman with more experience than half his management team combined. But he also knew Barbara Langley, knew her husband's name sat on a donor wall for the local school, knew the town council occasionally met in her backyard garden. When he reached Janelle, he didn't speak right away, just stood there, eyes shifting from her face to the screen of the register. She wants a different associate, he said, barely above a whisper. Janelle looked at him, expression unreadable. And you? Todd faltered. Then, as if the words betrayed him, she's a regular. Janelle took off her apron, slowly, precisely. She folded it once, then twice, then laid it on the counter. The store around them fell eerily quiet, as if everyone had stopped breathing. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a slim leather card holder. From it, she removed a badge. It gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Janelle Carter, Regional Director, Southeast Division, Brookridge Market Corporation. Todd's face went white. He stepped back instinctively. I'm here on an unannounced field evaluation, she said, calm and exact. It's something I do quarterly. Today I chose this store. From behind the bakery counter, someone gasped. Janelle turned, scanned the room, and addressed him directly. Todd, I think you already knew that, didn't you? He blinked. I thought you weren't scheduled until… I wasn't. Todd opened his mouth again, then closed it. At that moment, Barbara's voice rang out again from across the store. What's the holdup? Are we really letting this nonsense continue? Janelle looked at Todd, her eyes still. Should I handle this? Todd hesitated. The pressure of dozens of watching eyes burned into him. And then, slowly, he nodded. Janelle picked up her badge and stepped away from the register. As she walked toward the customer service counter, Barbara looked smug until Janelle held up the badge for her to see. The color drained from Barbara's face. The store manager didn't move. Janelle looked Barbara square in the eyes and said, "Let's talk about your complaint in the office." Barbara's manicured fingers clenched the handle of her shopping cart so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her jaw worked slowly, grinding through disbelief as she stared at the badge in Janelle Carter's hand. The store around them had melted into background noise. No beeping registers, no quiet chatter, just a collective silence. All eyes watched one of Brookridge's wealthiest residents being escorted by a black woman toward the manager's office. Janelle didn't gloat. She didn't flinch or fluster. Her posture remained straight, her steps deliberate, her expression unreadable. Even in moments like this, she understood that too much pride could be misread as arrogance. Her very presence already challenged enough assumptions. To maintain control, she had to perform precision. The manager's office sat in the back of the store. A cramped space meant more for quick payroll chats than racial escalations. But it would do. As they passed the bakery, one of the teenage employees mouthed the word "damn" to his coworker. Another staffer, Melissa, a young Latina with a nervous edge, ducked behind the juice refrigerator to avoid being seen watching. Janelle glanced sideways at Barbara, who was still fuming in silence. "Would you prefer we handle this somewhere else?" Janelle asked evenly. "I'll prefer it when I'm speaking with someone above you," Barbara snapped. Janelle smiled gently, like someone listening to a toddler throw a tantrum. "You may want to check who I report to before you escalate that request." Barbara huffed but followed her through the frosted glass door. The room felt smaller than usual. The hum of the air conditioning did nothing to cool the tension. Barbara plopped into the guest chair, arms crossed tightly, exhaling with the exaggerated exhaustion of someone used to being obeyed instantly. Janelle remained standing. "Would you like water?" she asked politely. "I'd like you terminated." Janelle nodded once. Not in agreement, but acknowledgement. She took out a legal pad from a drawer, her pen clicking softly. "Let's go over your complaint, Miss Langley. Please describe what happened, from your perspective." Barbara's eyes narrowed. "Don't patronize me. I know what this is. You're doing this to cover yourself legally. I'm documenting a formal customer complaint, per company protocol," Janelle said, unbothered. "If you wish to proceed, I'll need your account." "I walked into the store," Barbara began, voice stiff, and was immediately treated with disrespect. That woman, she gestured toward the door, was rude, dismissive, and clearly unqualified. She made me feel uncomfortable. "In what way was she rude?" Barbara faltered. She had an attitude. She looked me in the eye, in a way that was just hostile. "Did she use inappropriate language?"
No.
Raise her voice? "No. But the vibe was wrong. And I don't trust food handlers with that kind of demeanor." Janelle wrote in silence, each stroke of the pen deliberate. Then she set it down. "Ms. Langley," she said, "I'm here today in my capacity as regional director for this district. My role includes conducting unannounced operational audits, particularly in locations with rising internal complaints. Brookridge Market. This location has received 3 in the last 4 months, all alleging discriminatory customer behavior that went unchallenged by staff. Barbara's face twisted. So what? You're playing spy game? No, Janelle said simply. I'm observing. And you've given me quite a case study. The door opened slightly. Todd, the store manager, peeked in. Everything okay? Janelle waved him off with a nod. Please give us privacy, Todd. He nodded, eyes flickering nervously toward Barbara, then left. Once the door closed, Barbara leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was slipping into a confession booth. Let me tell you something. I've been shopping here since before you knew how to spell supermarket. I know standards. I know when someone doesn't and you, whoever you think you are, you don't belong in the front of this store. Janelle looked at her without flinching. Do you understand the implication of that statement? Barbara rolled her eyes. Oh, don't twist my words. I'm not a racist. I'm just someone who wants service from professionals who look and act the part. And what part is that? You know what I mean. Janelle let the silence stretch between them, until it turned uncomfortable, then sharp. I do, and I want you to say it aloud. Barbara hesitated. I want someone who's not trying to make a statement, she said finally, who doesn't look like they're here for optics. I want someone who earned their position. Janelle didn't move. You don't believe I earned this position? Barbara's tone grew brittle. I think this entire store has gone woke, and I think you're using your skin color as a shield. Janelle exhaled slowly, gathering herself. Ms. Langley, do you know how many performance reviews I passed to get to this role? How many years I spent working holidays, while people like you were being catered to in the same aisles you just stormed through? Do you know how many times I was told to smile more, dress less urban, or stay out of sight during peak hours, just so customers wouldn't feel uncomfortable? Barbara folded her arms tighter. I worked twice as hard for half the praise. And now that I'm here, now that I have the title and the power, you think you can undo all of that with a complaint form? No. You're not here because I'm unqualified. You're here because someone finally made you face the fact that we belong in positions like this too. And that terrifies you. Barbara's face flushed deep crimson. You think you can talk to me like that and keep your job? I do, Janelle said. Then I'll make sure you don't, Barbara replied. Snatching her purse open, Janelle thought she was reaching for her car keys. Maybe a notepad, maybe another self-righteous letter to corporate. But instead, Barbara pulled out her phone. One tap, then another. The red light blinked to life. I'm live, she announced to no one and everyone. I'm here with the most unprofessional woman I've ever met in retail. This is how they treat loyal customers now, accusing us, gaslighting us, all because we speak up. Janelle stood, stepping back from the desk. Her mind calculated 10 things at once. Legal risk, company liability, her personal safety. But her face remained the same, unreadable, unshaken. Barbara pointed the phone at her. Let's see how long you keep your job, once this gets out. As the comment notifications begin flashing across Barbara's phone screen in rapid succession, her smug smile falters. One comment repeats over and over. Wait, isn't that Janelle Carter from the Diversity Leadership Summit? Barbara looks up, eyes wide with confusion. Janelle steps forward, her voice low. You just made this very public. I hope you're ready for what comes next. The red light on Barbara Langley's phone camera pulsed like a silent siren, alerting the digital world to another injustice committed against a self-proclaimed victim. She sat in the office chair like a queen on a throne, lips pursed, phone lifted at an angle flattering enough to frame her authority, but low enough to keep Janelle in view. Black girl thinks she's a boss, read the caption under the live stream. But the internet was watching, and it wasn't buying what Barbara was selling. Within minutes, the video had been screen recorded, reshared and reposted across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Some of the first reactions matched Barbara's intent. Thinly veiled racism masked as customer rights rhetoric. Why is a cashier acting like a CEO? One comment read. Another diversity hire gone wrong, typed another. But then the tide shifted. One user zoomed in and paused on Janelle's badge. Wait, Janelle Carter? Isn't she the keynote speaker from the Diversity Leadership Summit? Another comment rolled in. Bro, she's not just staff, she runs the whole damn region. Someone dug up a clip from a TEDx talk. Meet Janelle Carter, from foster kid to Fortune 500 exec. Within 10 minutes, the narrative flipped. Sympathy turned into scrutiny. The original commenters, those eager to echo Barbara's disdain, began deleting their posts. New users flooded in, demanding accountability. Back in the cramped office, Janelle remained composed, though the storm brewing beyond those glass walls now roared inside her phone. The live comments poured in so fast it was difficult to read them all. Some supportive, some confused, many indignant. She handled that with poise. Give her a raise. Why do these types always pull the uncomfortable card when a black woman's in charge? We need to talk about the microaggressions that become macro online. Barbara's smug expression began to wither. Her eyes darted between comments, confusion folding into something unfamiliar. Fear. She wasn't trending for sympathy. She was trending for scorn. Why is everyone defending her, she asked, voice suddenly brittle. Janelle didn't answer. She didn't need to. The internet had become the jury, and the verdict was not in Barbara's favor. But behind that stoic calm, a weight settled on Janelle's chest. Not fear, not anger, but exhaustion. She'd spent years being careful, careful not to be too aggressive, careful not to overperform or underdeliver, careful not to be too black for the spaces she had earned. And even then, even now, she was still being questioned. The flood of memories came in slow flashes. Her as a 14-year-old in a foster home in Macon, Georgia, folding other kids' laundry just to feel useful. Her at 16, holding down a cashier job at a rundown corner store with flickering lights and bulletproof glass. Her at 22, graduating with honors, despite being told corporate America isn't built for people like you. Janelle blinked once. Then again. But the ache lingered. Outside the office, the store buzzed with a different kind of energy. Employees clustered in awkward silence near the cereal aisle. Some scrolled through their phones, pretending not to be reading the comments. Others whispered behind the pastry shelves, stealing glances toward the back hallway. Luis, the assistant manager, avoided eye contact altogether. He busied himself with an already organized inventory list, crossing off items that didn't need reviewing. Every time he passed the office, he walked faster. He had once told Janelle in passing, "It's best not to rock the boat too much." Now the boat had capsized and he was paddling for neutrality. The break room conversation turned from curiosity to discomfort. Staff questioned not just what had happened, but why it felt so familiar. "That's the same woman who snapped at me last month for smiling too big," whispered Carmen, a black cashier barely out of high school. "Said I looked like I was mocking her. And didn't she file a complaint when Rico bagged her groceries and said ma'am instead of miss?" Someone else added. Each recollection felt like a new match dropped into a dry forest. Janelle's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a number she recognized. Corporate headquarters. She answered with a steady, "This is Janelle." Janelle came the voice of Brian Keller, the vice president of operations. His tone was brisk but not unfriendly. "We're aware of the situation. It's making rounds online fast. We've seen the live footage." She exhaled quietly. "I assumed as much. We're letting you take the lead. Don't say anything to the press just yet. But internally, proceed as you see fit." The call ended just as quickly as it began. There was no instruction to step down. No suggestion to issue an apology. It was a clear vote of confidence. But it still came with weight. Janelle knew how the corporate world worked. Confidence could shift with public mood. She had the reins now. But if things escalated, those reins could slip from her hands in a blink. Barbara, meanwhile, was scrolling through her own live stream, panic creeping across her face. The comments had turned venomous. "Karen alert. You're the reason DI exists. She's not a cashier. She's your boss's boss's boss. Why are people being so mean?" Barbara muttered. "Because you underestimated who you were speaking to." Janelle replied, her voice sharp with quiet power. "You thought you were punching down, but you were punching up and the world just watched you miss." Barbara's phone buzzed. A message from Annette, one of her wine club friends. "This isn't looking good. Maybe delete the video." But it was far too late for that. Outside the office, the store was no longer just a local grocer. It was ground zero for a national conversation. Media outlets had already begun drafting headlines. Hashtags were trending. "Janelle Carter deserves better.
Not just a cashier.
Karen versus director." Barbara looked up again, as if finally realizing the fire she'd lit wasn't burning her enemies. It was consuming her carefully curated image. "I want to leave," she said, standing abruptly. "You're welcome to," Janelle said evenly. But I will be documenting everything, including this live stream and your statements. You're now part of a formal internal investigation. Barbara blinked, stunned. Investigation? For what? For conduct that violates our store's discrimination policies. And potentially our harassment policy. You can't be serious.
I'm very serious.
As Barbara stumbled toward the door, muttering about lawyers and public defamation, Janelle remained seated, calm, unflinching. She turned her phone face down on the desk and exhaled. The world was watching now, but not all attention was equal. Some eyes scanned for vulnerability. Others hunted for cracks in her armor. Her phone buzzed again, this time an unfamiliar number. A text followed. Hi Janelle, this is Zora Menken, from The Atlantic. We're doing a story on Black professionals facing public racism. Are you ready to talk? Janelle stared at the screen, heartbeat steady, but her pulse quickened. A national feature, a voice beyond corporate statements and internal memos. She reached for her phone, but before she could reply, another message popped up, this one from a private number. Stay quiet if you know what's good for you. The air inside the employee break room was stale with the smell of burnt coffee and microwaved frozen dinners. But today it carried something thicker tension, the kind that made people speak in lower tones, eyes darting toward the door as they whispered names like secrets. At the center of those hushed conversations was a single name, Janelle. Not everyone was cheering her on. She played the whole damn store, muttered Travis Weller, floor supervisor and longtime Brookridge Market veteran, as he flicked the edge of his paper cup. His voice was low, but not low enough. She's been here less than a year, and acts like she built this place. Across the table, Gary, a stockroom clerk, shrugged. You heard corporate. She's a regional director. That ain't nothing, Travis scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Please, you really think she got that without help? They needed a face, and she knew how to smile when the right people were watching. His tone wasn't just bitter, it was bruised. What he didn't say out loud, but everyone in the room knew, was that Travis thought the position should have been his. He'd been here 6 years, trained half the team, stayed late, picked up shifts, said yes when others said maybe. But the moment corporate rolled out their diversity hiring initiative, a woman who looked nothing like him showed up at the leadership table. No one said it to his face, but his nickname had become Mr. Entitlement among some of the younger staff, especially those who knew what it meant to be overlooked, not for being underqualified, but for being too black, too loud, too visible. Flashbacks burned through Travis's mind like old film reels. The time Janelle invited him to a department meeting, and he accidentally got left off the calendar. When she implemented a scheduling system that took away his ability to assign his favorite shifts. The day she called out discrepancies in how stocking shifts were distributed, and Travis had to explain why non-white workers were getting fewer premium hours. It all piled up, quietly, undeniably, like salt in a wound. He told himself it wasn't about race, that it was about fairness, merit, seniority, but even as he repeated it, something bitter clung to the back of his throat. Janelle hadn't done anything overt. That was the problem. Her power wasn't loud. It was surgical. She made changes that couldn't be called hostile, but always seemed to shrink his influence. You really believe she's the victim here? Travis pressed. Gary didn't answer, but the room had grown quieter. In the hallway, Carmen, the young black cashier, stood with her arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the door had been left slightly ajar. She leaned in just enough to hear Travis's next line. She didn't earn that job. She got it because of how she looks. That's the truth no one wants to say. Carmen's jaw tightened. She turned sharply and walked back to the front of the store, heels clicking with purpose. Across the floor, Janelle was standing near the floral display, giving quiet instructions to Melissa about customer flow. Her demeanor was unreadable, as always, but beneath her calm exterior, she was cataloging every sideways glance, every half-hearted nod, every delayed response. Leadership had taught her to read what wasn't said more fluently than what was. Her success hadn't insulated her from microaggressions. It had simply made them more subtle. The sideways compliments that felt more like warnings. The constant code switching. The endless dance of being assertive but not abrasive. Confident but not aggressive. Even before today, Janelle had seen the divide. She just hadn't known how deep it ran. She could feel it in moments that passed without acknowledgement. How Travis avoided saying her name in meetings. How suggestions she made were repeated by him 5 minutes later, as if they'd just been invented. How he once told her, "You've got a strong presence. Maybe tone it down for the team." Janelle hadn't flinched then. She never did. But it sank in. And yet, not everyone was against her. In the produce aisle, Jaden, a college sophomore working part-time, leaned over the apples to whisper to Mia, a Filipina cashier, "She's the realest boss we've had. For once, somebody in charge looks like us." Mia nodded. "She made sure I got Sundays off for church." First manager who asked what days I needed. Around the store, a quiet resistance was forming, not against Janelle, but for her. Younger staff, often overlooked or talked down to, had found something in her they hadn't seen before, representation without apology, and now they were watching to see if her armor would crack. Back in the break room, Travis's phone buzzed. He didn't recognize the number at first, but the area code was corporate. He stepped outside, thumbed the screen, and answered. "Travis Weller." "Yeah, speaking." "This is Shayna from corporate HR. We're reaching out because we've received multiple reports regarding an incident at your location today. We'll need your full account of what happened, especially any staff conduct leading up to and during the customer interaction with Miss Carter." Travis's pulse jumped. "Wait, why me?" "Because you're listed as a floor supervisor on duty. And your name came up more than once in the early internal reports. We're asking for a statement by the end of day. If you witnessed anything, or contributed to any aspect of the situation, we recommend full transparency." The line went silent, except for the distant hum of an office in the background. Travis swallowed. His mind raced. What had been said? Who had said it? "I'll write something up. Thank you. Please email it directly to HR Compliance before 5 p.m. The line went dead. Travis stood frozen outside the store's back door, the summer sun baking down on him, but his skin cold with realization. The narrative wasn't just spinning out of control. It was swallowing everything he'd thought was secure. He reached into his pocket for his phone again, fingers trembling. Inside the store, Carmen walked past the registers, pulled out her phone, and quietly started typing an anonymous email to HR. The subject line read, "Supervisor bias and toxic behavior. Ongoing issues." As Travis finally opens the Notes app to draft his version of the story, he notices something new. An email already sent from his address that he didn't write. The subject line reads, "My side of what really happened today." His eyes widen as he clicks it open, and what he reads inside could cost him everything. "You people always pull the race card when you don't get your way." Barbara snapped, arms folded like a shield, her voice sharp enough to slice through the stale air of the office. She spat the words not with volume, but with venom, controlled, rehearsed, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never had to consider that her words might bruise. Janelle didn't flinch. She sat behind the desk, fingers calmly tapping the keyboard, as she continued logging the complaint with surgical precision. Her composure wasn't robotic. It was defiant. It was the stillness of someone who had spent a lifetime being poked, provoked, and painted as angry, and had learned that silence too could be a weapon. Her tone didn't rise. "Ms. Langley, I'm documenting your experience exactly as you're stating it. I'll attach this to our formal customer feedback log, and it will be reviewed by our executive team, including HR and store operations." Barbara scoffed. "Oh, please. This is just for show. You're pretending to follow protocol to protect yourself." "No," Janelle said smoothly. "I'm following company policy, something that applies equally to all customers, no matter how loud they are." The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. Barbara's face twitched. For the first time that day, uncertainty flickered across her features. She'd come in furious and self-assured, expecting compliance, fear, perhaps even a placating apology. Instead, she'd found resistance, quiet, professional, unnerving resistance. Then she noticed the nameplate on the desk. Janelle Carter. Something about it itched at the edges of her memory. "Carter," she murmured. Her eyes narrowed. Are you related to Judge Emmanuel Carter?" Janelle looked up from the screen and nodded once, cool and unbothered. "He's my uncle." Barbara's breath caught. She leaned back in the chair, the color draining slightly from her cheeks. The name held weight. Judge Carter wasn't just a name in the state. He was a political and judicial force. His rulings had reshaped housing policy. His community work was nationally recognized. He'd been the keynote at 3 bar association galas. And crucially, he'd made headlines for a ruling that dismantled a racially discriminatory neighborhood development board in the exact same county where Barbara now sat. Her voice softened. Oh, I see. He's very respected. Janelle's expression didn't change. Yes, he is. The power dynamic twisted so fast it left Barbara dizzy. She no longer looked like the queen of her own narrative. She looked like someone watching her own reputation slip through her fingers like sand. I didn't mean anything by what I said earlier, she added quickly. I just meant sometimes in the heat of the moment, things come out wrong. Miss Langley, I recorded this meeting, Janelle said flatly. Per company policy, including your earlier statements. Would you like to revise your complaint on record? Barbara stiffened. No, that won't be necessary. But her eyes were racing. Inside her head, a damage control operation was already spinning at full speed. Who had seen the video? How many people would recognize her? How would this look to the board? Because Barbara Langley wasn't just a wealthy customer. She sat on 2 advisory panels, chaired the local Businesswomen's Association, and was a lead donor at a local charter school. Her reputation was currency, and right now, she was hemorrhaging value. I think, she said suddenly, this has all gotten a little blown out of proportion. Janelle leaned back slightly. It usually does when someone's held accountable for the first time. Barbara opened her mouth, then closed it. A sudden silence stretched between them, thick and tense, broken only by the low buzz of a desk fan. And in that stillness, a new emotion flickered across Barbara's face. Not anger, not shame, but fear. It was the same fear Janelle had seen a dozen times in high-level meetings. Fear from people who thought their pedigree protected them, who'd never been challenged, never had to look up instead of down. Now Barbara was looking up, and she didn't like the view. Janelle began tidying the file, clicking the complaint form shut, saving the audio transcript. Barbara stood abruptly. I should go. Of course. She turned to the door, then hesitated. This doesn't have to be public, right? I mean, you can handle this internally? Janelle said nothing. Barbara's hand tightened around the doorknob. But outside that office door, the damage was already done. As Barbara stepped into the main store, her phone buzzed. A notification from her work email. Subject line: urgent video in circulation. HR required response. Her stomach dropped. Another message came seconds later, from the executive assistant of the school, where she sat on the donor advisory board. We've seen the video. The head of school would like to schedule an emergency call. And then, just as she was halfway to the exit, a ping from her law firm's managing partner. Barbara, what is this? We're seeing on Twitter. Her face flushed hot with panic. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her phone was lighting up faster than she could open it. Comments, messages, emails, all asking the same unspoken question. How could you be so reckless? As she reached the automatic doors, she nearly bumped into a woman walking in, mid-30s, black with a little boy in tow. The woman paused when she recognized Barbara. Her smile faded. She pulled her son closer, whispering something in his ear. Barbara didn't meet her gaze. Inside the store, staff members watched from behind displays, unsure if they should laugh, cheer, or just breathe again. Carmen exchanged a look with Mia that said everything without saying a word. The moment was bigger than just this one incident. It was the unveiling of a deeper rot, one they all recognized. Back in the office, Janelle stared at her screen. She didn't smile, didn't relax, because she knew the fallout wasn't over. This wasn't a win. This was a spark. And sparks, if left unchecked, could start fires on either side of the battlefield. She glanced at her phone. A new email had arrived from a private address. No subject line. Inside was a screenshot. An old lawsuit filing. Janelle read the heading. Langley vs. Brooks. HOA complaint. Allegation. Threatening behavior by neighbor. Defendant Andre Brooks. Retired school principal. Black. Accused of loitering on his own front lawn. Attached below was a newspaper snippet. Case dismissed. Plaintiff reprimanded for discriminatory language. Janelle's eyes narrowed. Before she could process the implications, her office phone rang. She answered with her usual calm, but the voice on the other end jolted her spine straight. This is Director Spencer from Civil Rights Investigations. We need to talk about Barbara Langley. Now. It started with a locked drawer. 3 days after the boardroom Zoom, and just hours after receiving the chilling message with the altered personnel file, Janelle sat alone in the Brookridge Market office long after closing hours. The overhead fluorescents flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the file cabinets, the gray carpet, the bulletin board dotted with HR posters about inclusion that now felt cruelly ironic. She didn't want to believe someone inside the company had tried to falsify her record. But the screenshot was undeniable. Someone had added a final warning note to her digital profile, suggesting prior misconduct that never existed. Whoever had done it hadn't anticipated she'd receive a copy. She was still trying to process the implications when she noticed something odd. The suggestion box, mounted beside the break room fridge, had a thin layer of dust on it. The slit was still sealed shut. No one had opened it in weeks, maybe months. Out of instinct, she grabbed the small key from the labeled hook on the office wall. It was a formality, something most regional directors rarely bothered with. But Janelle wasn't most directors, and this was no longer business as usual. Inside the rusted metal box were over 24 folded slips, some yellowing from age. She took them out one by one, laying them across her desk in a neat grid. Her heart began to beat faster as her eyes traced the handwriting. Raw, shaky, anonymous, but real. Customers ask for someone white all the time. I was told to just deal with it. I got passed over for a promotion after 5 years. The person who got it was white and had worked here 3 months. Travis told me my braids looked too urban for the front register. HR said my complaint wasn't strong enough to prove intent. But the manager called me aggressive for asking a schedule question. I changed my hairstyle after I overheard a customer say I looked dirty. The supervisor just laughed. Every note was a wound that had never scabbed. Janelle read each one in silence, the weight pressing heavier with each line. Some had dates going back over a year. Some had names. Others ended with a single plea, "Please do something." She felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Not panic, not dread. It was the sharp, hot ache of recognition, of knowing this wasn't unique to Brookridge. It wasn't even new. This was what structural racism looked like when it settled in quietly, learned to blend in with schedules, policies, and polite tones. The next morning, Janelle called a mandatory all-staff meeting, but this time, she invited no one from upper management. She scheduled it under the guise of wellness check-ins, and asked employees to come in one at a time for private, confidential conversations. The office turned into a confessional. Carmen was first. She looked nervous but resolute. "I've had white customers ask if I'm new, even though I've been here a year longer than half the team. When I said no, one woman told me I spoke too confidently to be just a cashier." Janelle nodded, taking notes by hand. Rico, a shy but sharp bagger in his early 20s, shared a time when he was written up for being disrespectful after he gently corrected a customer who mispronounced his name, and then called him Raheem on purpose. "I didn't yell. I didn't even frown," he said. "I just said, 'That's not my name.' The next day I got a warning. They said I made the woman feel unsafe." The stories spilled out like floodwater. Melissa, who'd never spoken much before, admitted she stopped applying for full-time roles after Travis told her she'd have a better chance if she lost the accent. She was born in Tampa. Jaden, the part-time college student, revealed he'd been asked by Travis to stand closer to the carts near the entrance, so it looks more diverse up front when corporate visits. Janelle's pen never stopped moving. What became clear wasn't just the pattern of abuse, but how it had been institutionalized. Racism wasn't shouted, it was whispered, dressed in language like team fit, presentation, or customer comfort. Every one-on-one added another crack to the facade. Brookridge had carefully painted over the years, and Barbara Langley's incident? It was no longer just a headline. It was the spark that had ignited a warehouse of gasoline long buried beneath community charm and polished customer service. And then, just when Janelle thought the worst had already been unearthed, a knock on the office door changed everything. It was Mia, the soft-spoken Filipina cashier who usually kept to herself. She stepped inside hesitantly, clutching a small manila envelope. "I wasn't sure if I should share this," she said, voice shaking. "But I found it when I was helping Travis clean out the old storeroom last month." Inside the envelope was a printed email chain. The dates were old, but not too old. Just 9 months ago. Janelle sat up straighter as she read. The thread started benign enough. Shift discussions, schedule changes. But then, subject, store image, from Travis Weller to Jason Rowe, regional manager, now on leave. Body. "I think having Janelle as the face of the district is bold. But if the optics are what corporate wants, I'll play along. Just don't be surprised if the team starts to misinterpret her style. She's intense. Could backfire if the wrong customers take it the wrong way. Below it, a reply from Jason Rowe. Use her where it makes us look progressive, but keep her far from conflict zones. We can't afford PR nightmares right now. If she burns out or makes noise, we'll pivot to someone safer. Janelle's hands trembled slightly as she lowered the paper. This wasn't bias, this was strategy. They hadn't just tolerated racism, they'd calculated around it. She was being used, paraded for diversity when convenient, hidden when not. I didn't know who else to give it to, Mia whispered. Janelle looked at her, eyes softening. You gave it to the right person. That evening, Janelle scanned the documents, saved them to a secure drive, and forwarded them to corporate legal and HR with a single subject line: formal whistleblower packet. Internal collusion and strategic discrimination. Just as she hit send, her office phone rang again. This time it was Jason Rowe's number, reinstated, and calling. The subject line hit her like a punch she'd never see coming. Keep her out front, diversity optics are good for us. It sat at the top of the email chain like a dagger laced in courtesy. The sender, Vincent Laramie, Regional Vice President for Southeast Retail Strategy. His title sounded polished, inoffensive. The man behind it was anything but. Janelle stared at the screen, reading the email again, this time slower, as if disbelief might dissolve on the second pass. The thread was dated 7 months before her promotion. She'd been unaware of its existence. It wasn't in any of her personnel files, wasn't listed in the official recommendation archive. Someone had tried to delete it, scrub it, but whoever gave her the whistleblower documents had retrieved it from an archived backup. The email was short, clinical, to Jason Rowe. From Vincent Laramie. Subject: REA. District promotion. Janelle looks great on paper. Strong interview. Articulate. But we both know this is about visuals. Having a black woman in leadership buys us breathing room. Keep her out front for a while. Optics are good, but be ready to replace her if she becomes disruptive. Disruptive. That word. It slithered through her spine like something venomous. In corporate code, disruptive was never about behavior. It was about presence. It meant, you speak too much truth. You make white discomfort visible. You aren't willing to play the part without asking for the pen. Janelle's fingers hovered above her desk. Her throat tightened. Anger surged. But it wasn't hot or reckless. It was focused, controlled. Her entire life had trained her to metabolize pain into strategy. She had earned her promotion. Every grueling panel interview. Every unpaid overtime shift. Every report delivered early. Every market metric exceeded. And now here it was, on paper reduced to a good visual. She inhaled, steadying her breath. Dignity was her weapon. Rage would be their excuse. Her mind flashed back to the week she'd interviewed for the promotion. 5 different interviews, 2 psychometric assessments, a market knowledge exam. She'd been asked how she'd handle difficult customers, challenging teams, and conflicting feedback. All code, all traps. Jason Rowe had shaken her hand and told her she had a presence that could inspire. Vincent Laramie had said, "Your professionalism is refreshing." Now she knew what they had really meant. You'll look good in the newsletter. Just don't ask for too much. Janelle's hands trembled as she hit the print button. The soft hum of the office printer buzzed to life, spitting out the incriminating words one line at a time. She printed 3 copies, one for HR legal, one for her secure folder, and one for her attorney, whose contact she had saved for just this kind of betrayal. She slipped the copies into a folder marked Internal Policy Review, a label so boring no one would question it. Outside her office, the store carried on under artificial lights. Carts rolled, price tags beeped. But inside that small room, a revolution had just taken shape. Janelle's phone buzzed again. Another text from the whistleblower. One sentence: "He's on his way to you." Her heart paused mid-beat. The whistleblower meant Vincent. A minute later she heard it. Heavy footsteps in the back hallway, approaching with the careless confidence of someone who still thought he was untouchable. She glanced toward the door as it opened. Vincent Laramie stepped inside like he owned the space. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, blazer casually open, smile a little too smooth. "Janelle," he said, extending a hand, like nothing was wrong. "Glad I caught you." She stood but didn't take it. "Vincent." He looked around the office like a realtor appraising a low-value property. "Didn't realize you were still based out of this location." "Temporary reassignment," she said coolly. "I prefer to be where the work matters." He chuckled. easing into the guest chair without invitation. Well, let's talk, shall we? Janelle didn't sit. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a leather folio. The company's under heat. This whole Langley thing is spreading fast. There's chatter about lawsuits, press conferences. We need to be smart, strategic. She folded her arms. I'm listening. We can't have this spiral into another PR nightmare. You've done great work, Janelle. Don't let this moment redefine you. We'd like to offer you a new title, Director of Community Engagement. Same pay, better optics. Let the heat die down. Janelle's jaw clenched. Better optics. Don't read into it, he said, waving off the word like it was harmless. We just need someone less directly tied to the incident. It's a win-win. She tilted her head. Is this your way of pushing me sideways? His smile faltered. Of course not. It's repositioning. You know how this works. Janelle stepped behind her desk, slowly pulled out the folder, laid it in front of him without a word. Vincent opened it. His eyes scanned the printout, and for the first time the confidence cracked. He didn't speak. That's your email, Janelle said. Your words, your strategy. Keep her out front. Replace her if she becomes disruptive. His throat bobbed. I earned this job, she continued, voice low and steady, and you tried to erase that with a sentence. Vincent leaned forward, suddenly aggressive. You need to understand what's at stake. That was a private conversation that you sent on a company server, she interrupted. You're making this personal, he snapped. It is personal, she said. Because you made me a mascot when I was qualified to be a leader, and now you want me to step aside before I say too much. He stood abruptly. Think very carefully about your next move. I already have. Their eyes locked. The power dynamic had shifted. Violently. Irreversibly. He knew it. She knew it. As Vincent turned to leave, flustered, he paused at the doorway. This will come back to you, he warned. Janelle didn't respond. He exited without looking back. Moments later, her computer pinged. A new internal message, marked confidential. Multiple complaints filed against you. Anonymous sources. Effective immediately. Attached was a growing list of grievances. At the top, creating a hostile environment for white employees. Janelle's laptop camera clicked on, casting her reflection into a grid of polished faces and pristine boardroom backdrops. The Zoom meeting had been scheduled under the pretense of situation alignment, but she knew what this really was. A high-stakes debrief, a trial in corporate civility, where tone mattered more than truth. As the virtual room filled, logos flickered in background blurs, executive offices in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. The silence before the call started felt ceremonial, like a boardroom curtain call before the next performance of carefully chosen words and calculated empathy. Janelle, said Kenneth Miles, Chief Operating Officer, nodding as if trying to preemptively soften the tension. Thank you for joining so promptly. We know it's been a morning. Her face remained still. I'm always available when the company's ethics are on the line. Miles shifted uncomfortably. Next to him on the call was Darla Venn, the VP of Brand Strategy, who offered a strained smile. We've all seen the footage, and it's gone viral in ways we didn't predict. No one predicted that the person being harassed would also be the highest-ranking person in the building. Janelle replied, her tone professional but coded in subtext. That was the miscalculation. From another square in the grid, Elliot Chen, CFO, cleared his throat. We're facing a media storm. Some voices are calling you a hero. Others are calling the store environment racially toxic. We need to decide what the brand's message is here. There's only one message, Janelle said. We take racism seriously. We stand behind employees who endure it. And we address the systems that allowed it to go unchecked. The screen went silent again. Then came the voice Janelle knew would shift the energy. Laura Shaw, Chief Legal Counsel. I think what Janelle's done so far has been within policy, Laura said, slow and deliberate. But we may need to consider softening the public tone, maybe a joint statement, something that diffuses the perception that we're combative toward customers. Diffuse it? Janelle repeated, one eyebrow lifting. Do you suggest we neutralize a clear case of racial abuse in the name of brand optics? Kenneth raised both hands, placating. No one's saying it wasn't wrong. But people are asking questions. Did we allow a power imbalance? Did our staff escalate it instead of de-escalating? Janelle leaned forward slightly. Her voice didn't rise. If anything, It got quieter, more dangerous. So the concern is not about the racism. It's about how calmly the target of it responded. Laura broke in. Let's not make this about semantics. It's never been about semantics, Janelle said, her voice tightening just enough to show she hadn't missed the subtext. It's always been about systems, and this one, the one we're all part of, is built to tiptoe around people like Barbara Langley, while asking women like me to explain why we deserve to exist in the spaces we've already earned. No one spoke. Even Elliot leaned back. Janelle continued. Do you know how many internal complaints I reviewed last month alone regarding racial bias from customers and colleagues? Do you know how many were not actionable because the language was coded just enough to escape accountability? She clicked her screen, pulled up a report she had prepared before even being asked. Her face was now a small corner image on top of a slideshow titled Undercurrent, the invisible barriers facing Black frontline workers. Slide after slide followed, testimonies from anonymous workers, patterns of complaints from 5 separate stores, footage of a white customer demanding a Latina cashier go back to her country, and email logs from assistant managers dismissing employee feedback as overly sensitive. These are not isolated. This is systemic, Janelle said. And until we stop responding with shallow apologies and start enacting structural change, we will keep replaying this same scene. On the screen, Maria Delgado, VP of Southwest Operations, unmuted. Her tone was supportive, steady. She's right, Maria said. This isn't about a single incident. It's about the environment that allowed that incident to feel normal to the person committing it. Finally, someone stood beside her in the fire. More voices followed, hesitantly at first. Some acknowledged that prior diversity training sessions had been treated like checkboxes. That store managers were often ill-equipped to respond to discrimination, much less lead against it. That the burden of grace always fell on the employee experiencing harm. Still, not everyone was on board. We're a grocery brand, Elliot said slowly. We're not a social justice institution. And yet, Janelle replied without missing a beat, we exist in communities. We sell food in places where Black workers are expected to smile through abuse and get blamed for flinching. We're not neutral, we're complicit, or we're accountable. Another beat of silence. Kenneth exhaled. So what are you proposing? Janelle looked directly into her camera. A comprehensive review of how Black and brown frontline employees are treated. Mandatory anti-racism training. Not the check-the-box kind. Real bias auditing. With transparency. Clear customer behavior policies that allow staff to safely refuse service to abusive patrons. And a public statement that we're no longer treating racism as a PR issue. It's a human rights issue. Darla blinked. That'll make waves. Then we ride them, Janelle replied. Or we drown in silence. There it was. Not a threat, but a fact. Flashbacks flickered in Janelle's own mind as she finished her pitch back to that diversity training the Brookridge store hosted 2 years ago. It lasted 45 minutes. Travis played on his phone. One white employee loudly asked if it was mandatory. Another rolled her eyes when the trainer spoke about microaggressions. That training ended with complimentary bagels and 0 follow-ups. Now the company had a decision to make, whether they would double down on optics or lean into uncomfortable truth. Kenneth finally looked into the camera, his face unreadable. Janelle, prepare a full report. Detailed. Real stories, real data. We'll review it next week. Will there be a public response? She asked. A moment passed. Then, yes. And Janelle, prepare for a press conference too. Janelle nodded, heart steady, until her phone vibrated just as the Zoom ended. She glanced down. A message from an anonymous internal number read, "Careful, you're making enemies you can't see." Attached was a blurry screenshot, Janelle's own personnel file, edited. The final warning field had been added. It started with a locked drawer. 3 days after the boardroom Zoom, and just hours after receiving the chilling message with the altered personnel file, Janelle sat alone in the Brookridge Market office. Long after closing hours, the overhead fluorescents flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the file cabinets, the gray carpet, the bulletin board dotted with HR posters about inclusion that now felt cruelly ironic. She didn't want to believe someone inside the company had tried to falsify her record. But the screenshot was undeniable. Someone had added a final warning note to her digital profile, suggesting prior misconduct that never existed. Whoever had done it hadn't anticipated she'd receive a copy. She was still trying to process the implications when she noticed something odd. The suggestion box, mounted beside the break room fridge, had a thin layer of dust on it. The slit was still sealed shut. No one had opened it in weeks, maybe months. Out of instinct, she grabbed the small key from the labeled hook on the office wall. It was a formality, something most regional directors rarely bothered with. But Janelle wasn't most directors. And this was no longer business as usual. Inside the rusted metal box were over 24 folded slips, some yellowing from age. She took them out one by one, laying them across her desk in a neat grid. Her heart began to beat faster as her eyes traced the handwriting. Raw, shaky, anonymous, but real. Customers ask for someone white all the time. I was told to just deal with it. I got passed over for a promotion after 5 years. The person who got it was white and had worked here 3 months. Travis told me my braids looked too urban for the front register. HR said my complaint wasn't strong enough to prove intent. But the manager called me aggressive for asking a schedule question. I changed my hairstyle after I overheard a customer say I looked dirty. The supervisor just laughed. Every note was a wound that had never scabbed. Janelle read each one in silence, the weight pressing heavier with each line. Some had dates going back over a year. Some had names. Others ended with a single plea. Please do something. She felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Not panic, not dread. It was the sharp, hot ache of recognition. Of knowing this wasn't unique to Brookridge. It wasn't even new. This was what structural racism looked like when it settled in quietly. Learned to blend in with schedules, policies, and polite tones. The next morning, Janelle called a mandatory all-staff meeting, but this time she invited no one from upper management. She scheduled it under the guise of wellness check-ins, and asked employees to come in one at a time for private, confidential conversations. The office turned into a confessional. Carmen was first. She looked nervous but resolute. I've had white customers ask if I'm new, even though I've been here a year longer than half the team. When I said no, one woman told me I spoke too confidently to be just a cashier. Janelle nodded, taking notes by hand. Rico, a shy but sharp bagger in his early 20s, shared a time when he was written up for being disrespectful after he gently corrected a customer who mispronounced his name and then called him Rahim on purpose. I didn't yell, I didn't even frown, he said. I just said that's not my name. The next day, I got a warning. They said I made the woman feel unsafe. The stories spilled out like floodwater. Melissa, who'd never spoken much before, admitted she stopped applying for full-time roles after Travis told her she'd have a better chance if she lost the accent. She was born in Tampa. Jaden, the part-time college student, revealed he'd been asked by Travis to stand closer to the carts near the entrance, so it looks more diverse up front when corporate visits. Janelle's pen never stopped moving. What became clear wasn't just the pattern of abuse, but how it had been institutionalized. Racism wasn't shouted. It was whispered, dressed in language like team fit, presentation, or customer comfort. Every one-on-one added another crack to the facade Brookridge had carefully painted over the years. And Barbara Langley's incident? It was no longer just a headline. It was the spark that had ignited a warehouse of gasoline long buried beneath community charm and polished customer service. And then, just when Janelle thought the worst had already been unearthed, a knock on the office door changed everything. It was Mia, the soft-spoken Filipina cashier, who usually kept to herself. She stepped inside hesitantly, clutching a small manila envelope. I wasn't sure if I should share this, she said, voice shaking, but I found it when I was helping Travis clean out the old storeroom last month. Inside the envelope was a printed email chain. The dates were old, but not too old. Just 9 months ago. Janelle sat up straighter as she read. The thread started benign enough. Shift discussions, schedule changes. But then, subject, store image, from Travis Weller to Jason Rowe, regional manager now on leave. Body. I think having Janelle as the face of the district is bold. But if the optics are what corporate wants, I'll play along. Just don't be surprised if the team starts to misinterpret her style. She's intense. Could backfire if the wrong customers take it the wrong way. Below it, a reply from Jason Rowe. Use her where it makes us look progressive, but keep her far from conflict zones. We can't afford PR nightmares right now. If she burns out or makes noise, we'll pivot to someone safer. Janelle's hands trembled slightly as she lowered the paper. This wasn't bias. This was strategy. They hadn't just tolerated racism. They'd calculated around it. She was being used. Paraded for diversity when convenient, hidden when not. I didn't know who else to give it to. Mia whispered. Janelle looked at her, eyes softening. You gave it to the right person. That evening, Janelle scanned the documents, saved them to a secure drive, and forwarded them to corporate legal and HR with a single subject line. Formal whistleblower packet, internal collusion and strategic discrimination. Just as she hit send, her office phone rang again. This time it was Jason Rowe's number, reinstated, and calling. The subject line hit her like a punch she'd never see coming. Keep her out front, diversity optics are good for us. It sat at the top of the email chain, like a dagger laced in courtesy. The sender Vincent Laramie, Regional Vice President for Southeast Retail Strategy. His title sounded polished, inoffensive. The man behind it was anything but. Janelle stared at the screen, reading the email again. This time slower, as if disbelief might dissolve on the second pass. The thread was dated 7 months before her promotion. She'd been unaware of its existence. It wasn't in any of her personnel files, wasn't listed in the official recommendation archive. Someone had tried to delete it, scrub it, but whoever gave her the whistleblower documents had retrieved it from an archived backup. The email was short, clinical. To Jason Rowe. From Vincent Laramie. Subject Rayad District Promotion. Janelle looks great on paper. Strong interview, articulate. But we both know this is about visuals. Having a black woman in leadership buys us breathing room. Keep her out front for a while. Optics are good, but be ready to replace her if she becomes disruptive. Disruptive. That word. It slithered through her spine like something venomous. In corporate code, disruptive was never about behavior. It was about presence. It meant, you speak too much truth. You make white discomfort visible. You aren't willing to play the part without asking for the pen. Janelle's fingers hovered above her desk. Her throat tightened. Anger surged. But it wasn't hot or reckless. It was focused, controlled. Her entire life had trained her to metabolize pain into strategy. She had earned her promotion. Every grueling panel interview. Every unpaid overtime shift. Every report delivered early. Every market metric exceeded. And now, here it was, on paper, reduced to a good visual. She inhaled, steadying her breath. Dignity was her weapon. Rage would be their excuse. Her mind flashed back to the week she'd interviewed for the promotion. 5 different interviews. 2 psychometric assessments. A market knowledge exam. She'd been asked how she'd handle difficult customers, challenging teams, and conflicting feedback. All code. All trap. Jason Rowe had shaken her hand and told her she had a presence that could inspire. Vincent Laramie had said, your professionalism is refreshing. Now she knew what they had really meant. You'll look good in the newsletter. Just don't ask for too much. Janelle's hands trembled as she hit the print button. The soft hum of the office printer buzzed to life, spitting out the incriminating words one line at a time. She printed 3 copies, one for HR legal, one for her secure folder, and one for her attorney, whose contact she had saved for just this kind of betrayal. She slipped the copies into a folder marked Internal Policy Review, a label so boring no one would question it. Outside her office, the store carried on under artificial lights. Carts rolled, price tags beeped, but inside that small room, a revolution had just taken shape. Janelle's phone buzzed again. Another text from the whistleblower. 1 sentence. He's on his way to you. Her heart paused mid-beat. The whistleblower meant Vincent. A minute later, she heard it. Heavy footsteps in the back hallway, approaching with the careless confidence of someone who still thought he was untouchable. She glanced toward the door as it opened. Vincent Laramie stepped inside like he owned the space. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, blazer casually open, smile a little too smooth. Janelle, he said, extending a hand like nothing was wrong. Glad I caught you. She stood but didn't take it. Vincent. He looked around the office like a realtor appraising a low-value property. Didn't realize you were still based out of this location. Temporary reassignment, she said coolly. I prefer to be where the work matters. He chuckled, easing into the guest chair without invitation. Well, let's talk, shall we? Janelle didn't sit. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a leather folio. The company's under heat. This whole Langley thing is spreading fast. There's chatter about lawsuits, press conferences. We need to be smart, strategic. She folded her arms. I'm listening. We can't have this spiral into another PR nightmare. You've done great work, Janelle. Don't let this moment redefine you. We'd like to offer you a new title, Director of Community Engagement. Same pay, better optics. Let the heat die down. Janelle's jaw clenched. Better optics? Don't read into it, he said, waving off the word like it was harmless. We just need someone less directly tied to the incident. It's a win-win. She tilted her head. Is this your way of pushing me sideways? His smile faltered. Of course not. It's repositioning. You know how this works. Janelle stepped behind her desk, slowly pulled out the folder, laid it in front of him, without a word. Vincent opened it. His eyes scanned the printout, and for the first time, the confidence cracked. He didn't speak. That's your email, Janelle said. Your words. Your strategy. Keep her out front. Replace her if she becomes disruptive. His throat bobbed. I earned this job, she continued, voice low and steady. And you tried to erase that with a sentence. Vincent leaned forward, suddenly aggressive. You need to understand what's at stake. That was a private conversation.
That you sent on a company server, she interrupted.
You're making this personal, he snapped. It is personal, she said. Because you made me a mascot when I was qualified to be a leader. And now you want me to step aside before I say too much. He stood abruptly. Think very carefully about your next move. I already have. Their eyes locked. The power dynamic had shifted. Violently, irreversibly. He knew it. She knew it. As Vincent turned to leave, flustered, he paused at the doorway. This will come back to you, he warned. Janelle didn't respond. He exited without looking back. Moments later, her computer pinged. A new internal message, marked confidential. Multiple complaints filed against you. Anonymous sources. Effective immediately. Attached was a growing list of grievances. At the top, creating a hostile environment for white employees. Janelle sat motionless in her chair, arms crossed lightly, her gaze steady and unflinching. The office's fluorescent light flickered slightly, casting shadows across Vincent's face, revealing the glint of nerves behind his polished smile. It was the second time that week he'd shown up unannounced. This time, he didn't even bother pretending it was a courtesy visit. I've spoken to a few people upstairs, he continued, pacing slightly. The situation's escalating. External eyes are on us, and we can't afford division inside leadership right now. Janelle tilted her head slightly, watching him. Say what you came to say, Vincent. He paused, then dropped the script. We're offering you a reassignment. Quiet. Clean. Transfer to the Greenville district. Same title, same pay, but less public heat. She didn't blink. Less visibility. Call it what you want, he said, shrugging. You'd get a performance bonus, full relocation package, and 2 months of discretionary leave to recalibrate. A euphemism for disappear gracefully. Janelle sat back slowly, folding her hands together. And if I decline? Vincent's face remained neutral, but his voice tightened. Then we can't protect you from the blowback. You've made enemies, Janelle. Internal ones. Anonymous complaints are stacking up. HR has to open a file. That's policy. She could feel her heart rate rise, but forced her breathing to remain steady. Let me guess. Complaints about tone, leadership style, making people uncomfortable. He nodded once. Not surprising, given how visible you've become. You're being framed as polarizing. Her jaw flexed, but she didn't break. You brought this on yourself by dragging it into the spotlight, he added. The Barbara Langley situation could have been handled quietly, internally. Instead, you turned it into a movement. Janelle leaned forward now, voice low, each word laced with clarity. No. I didn't turn it into a movement. Your silence did. Your strategy, your manipulation. You wanted optics? Here's your optic. A black woman who refused to shrink. Vincent narrowed his eyes. Don't play martyr, Janelle. You're smarter than that. And you're running scared, she snapped. Because for the first time, someone pulled back the curtain. There was a pause. A charged silence that vibrated between them. Then Vincent smiled, soft and venomous. Performance audits are on the table now. Your Q2 numbers will be scrutinized. Emails pulled. Team turnover rates reviewed. You know how easy it is to bury someone in process. Janelle's blood ran cold, but only for a moment. She reached into her blazer pocket, subtly flicking the record button on her phone, concealed beneath the desk. She had started recording the moment he walked in. Her instincts had learned too well what protection meant. Vincent continued. Unaware. We're not terminating you, Janelle. That would look bad. But we will drown you in compliance. She smiled now, razor sharp. You came into my office and threatened me with bureaucratic harassment. I hope you're proud of that. He blinked, caught off guard by her sudden calm. "I'm not afraid of paper trails," she said. "I've left my own." He took a step back, eyes flicking to her phone. Suspicion crept into his features. "You're playing a dangerous game. You taught me the rules," she replied. "I'm just finally playing them better than you." Vincent walked out without another word, but not before muttering something under his breath. A curse, maybe, or a promise. After the door clicked shut, Janelle exhaled, slow and deliberate, then ended the recording. She immediately uploaded the file to an encrypted cloud drive, backed it up twice, and emailed a time-stamped version to her attorney and a civil rights advocate who had contacted her the day before. The walls were closing in, but she wasn't moving. She was bracing. That afternoon she held a brief team meeting. Casual. Off the books. No agendas. No emails. Just conversation. She didn't talk about Vincent, didn't mention HR or transfers. She talked about culture, about the difference between diversity as decoration and equity as architecture. The younger staff understood. So did the few veterans who still believed in decency over fear. But not everyone applauded. She noticed Travis watching her from across the floor, jaw tight, arms crossed. The HR complaints hadn't stopped. If anything, they were multiplying, weaponized whispers turning into digital bullets. That night, Janelle left the store just after 9 p.m., the parking lot nearly empty, the summer heat softened by a breeze that whispered of change and danger, all at once. Her car sat under one of the few working lights, a dark blue sedan she'd paid off last year. As she approached, something felt wrong. It took her a second to see it. Then it all rushed in at once. The front tires slashed. Not deflated. Torn. Deep, deliberate cuts. Knife work. She froze. The street was silent. No movement. No witnesses. But her instinct screamed louder than any siren. This wasn't vandalism. It was a message. She stepped back, scanned the lot, then quickly walked to the edge of the store's loading dock and called 911. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she gave her location. Then, almost instinctively, she opened her text messages and snapped a photo of the tires, sending it to her attorney with a simple line, "It's starting." As the police arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing, a familiar voice came from the shadows behind the patrol car. Barbara Langley, standing just off the curb in dark sunglasses, holding a clipboard. She flashed a badge not for law enforcement, but for a private firm. "Ms. Carter," she said with a smirk, "we're now conducting a civil investigation on behalf of multiple complainants. I'll need a word." The bouquet was beautiful. Sunflowers and lilies wrapped in brown paper, tied with a note that read, "For the courage you showed. Thank you." It was one of 36 arrangements that had arrived at the Brookridge store that week, each from a different corner of the country. Strangers, activists, former employees, even a few anonymous notes simply signed with, "One of the silent ones you spoke for." Janelle Carter stood at the front of the store, helping restock a display of canned goods, while Melissa handed her another envelope. The girl smiled weakly. "More mail. This one has glitter hearts." Janelle chuckled softly, slipping it into her tote. But just as she turned, she spotted a white envelope on the service desk. No return address. Her name was written in red marker. Slanted, rushed, angry. Inside, a single torn piece of paper that read, "You think you're some hero. We'll see if you're still smiling when this all comes crashing down. Watch your back, girl." No signature. Just a thick smear of black ink, where someone had attempted to smudge out whatever name was first written. Janelle didn't flinch. She placed the letter beside the others marked for security review, and walked back to her station like nothing had happened. But in her chest, a slow burn began to simmer, not from fear, but from the exhausting predictability of it all. With visibility came vulnerability. The media had caught wind of the story, and was running with it in every direction. Local news stations aired segments titled, "Cashier Confrontation Goes Viral," while national networks debated whether race was even relevant in retail spaces. One right-wing commentator mocked Janelle's overreaction, calling her a professional victim, and accused her of trying to cancel a customer for asking for basic service. Meanwhile, social media exploded with hashtags, "Justice for Janelle," "Karen vs. Carter," "Support Black Leadership." And then the darker corners of the internet showed up. Forums that specialized in hate campaigns had begun circulating doctored images, photoshopped versions of Janelle's employee ID next to fake mugshots, headlines implying she had lied about her credentials. A conspiracy thread claimed she was part of a woke coup designed to undermine corporate America from within. The company issued a generic press statement. We do not condone harassment in any form, and are reviewing all internal policies. It said nothing about Janelle by name. Nothing about what she endured. Still, letters kept arriving. One envelope contained nothing but a burnt piece of her LinkedIn profile. Another had a bullet casing taped to a postcard that read, "Don't forget where you live." Security was increased. A company-hired guard now shadowed her discreetly during closing shifts. Cameras were checked daily, and still her sense of safety unraveled thread by thread. One evening, as she walked into her apartment building, with her laptop and tote, she found her mother waiting at her front door, arms crossed, eyes red. "Ah," Janelle said, surprised. "You didn't call." "I didn't need to," Mrs. Carter replied, stepping inside before her. "I saw the news. I read the messages, and I'm telling you now, you need to stop. You need to walk away before they hurt you." Janelle set her bag down. "You think I haven't thought about that?" "I don't want to bury my daughter," her mother said, voice cracking. "And I don't want to see you broken by people who don't even see you as human." Janelle sat down on the couch, staring at the carpet. She was tired, more tired than she had admitted, even to herself. The kind of tired that settled deep in the bones and refused to leave, no matter how much sleep you got. "They've always seen me this way, Ma," she said quietly. "This isn't new, it's just visible now." Mrs. Carter sat beside her, taking her hand. "That doesn't mean you have to keep standing in front of the bullets." "I'm not standing for me," Janelle whispered. "I'm standing for everyone who couldn't. For Carmen. For Rico. For every worker who smiled through insults because rent was due." Her mother wiped her eyes and nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding. The next morning, Janelle returned to work as usual. Head high, notes organized, whistleblower evidence duplicated and secured. But the legal battle was no longer hypothetical. By noon, a courier arrived at the store. A sleek man in a gray suit handed her a manila envelope, thick and official. Inside was a civil subpoena. Plaintiff Barbara Langley. Claim: defamation of character, public humiliation, emotional distress. Demands: formal apology, financial compensation, and public retraction. Janelle read every line with clinical precision. Barbara wasn't just pushing back. She was declaring war on truth, on accountability, on the very idea that power should ever be confronted by those it looked down on. Attached to the lawsuit was a list of damaging consequences Barbara claimed to have suffered: suspension from her country club, removal from her HOA board, reputational trauma caused by unjustified character assassination, and beneath it all, her signature, steady, unapologetic. Janelle slid the papers back into the envelope and handed it to her lawyer that afternoon without a word. Later that night, she stood in her kitchen staring at the envelope again. She thought about everything that had happened. Barbara's sneer, Vincent's threats, the emails, the slashed tires, the flowers, the letters, the look in her mother's eyes. She poured herself a glass of water, took one long sip, then walked to her balcony and let the summer air wrap around her like armor. They had underestimated her. They thought the threats, the lawsuits, the media storm would break her. But what they hadn't counted on was the quiet fire she'd carried since childhood, since the day she realized that black women in power were never given room to stumble. They were expected to kneel, and she had never been good at kneeling. As Janelle turned back toward her apartment, her phone buzzed. A new email, no subject line, just a video attachment. She tapped it open and froze. It was surveillance footage from the store, dated 3 nights ago. It showed a figure in a hoodie, walking toward her car, and then Travis stepping out from the shadows, looking both ways, then handing the figure something small. The file name? Brookridge security footage TR confirmed. The courtroom buzzed with electricity before the session even began. Camera crews jostled outside, flashes pulsed like lightning against the courthouse windows, and reporters narrated live broadcasts with the urgency of a political scandal. In a trial that has gripped the nation, one anchor said, Regional Director Janelle Carter faces off against Barbara Langley, a prominent businesswoman accusing her of defamation after a racially charged confrontation went viral. Inside, the mood was taut. Janelle Carter sat at the plaintiff's table, composed in a deep navy suit, hair pulled back into a sleek bun. Her jaw was set, eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't acknowledge the whispers. Every breath she drew was deliberate. another refusal to fold under pressure. Across from her, Barbara Langley dabbed the corners of her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She wore pearl earrings and a high-collared ivory blouse that screamed innocence. Her legal team flanked her, all sharp suits and smug confidence, prepared to spin her tears into strategy. Judge Helena Price, a sharp-eyed black woman, with a reputation for cutting through theatrics, presided with quiet authority. "Let's proceed with cross-examination," the judge instructed. Chanel's attorney, Camilla Price, rose from her seat. She was a razor in heels, young, brilliant, and fearless, the type of lawyer who didn't raise her voice to command attention. She weaponized silence. She approached the witness stand where Vincent Laramie, the VP who had offered Janelle the quiet reassignment, now sat stiffly in a tailored gray suit. She flipped through her notes, then looked up slowly. "Mr. Laramie," she said, "do you recall an email you sent to Jason Rowe regarding Miss Carter's promotion?" Vincent cleared his throat. "I sent many emails during that period." Camilla nodded. "Let's focus on one in particular. Dated 7 months before the promotion. Subject line: keep her out front. Diversity optics are good for us. Does that sound familiar?" A ripple of reaction moved through the courtroom. Vincent's face twitched. "I may have used those words. It was industry speak. Harmless." Camilla stepped closer. "Harmless? You referred to a black woman with 15 years of retail leadership experience as a visual asset, not a professional. You implied she was chosen not for her qualifications, but for her skin color. She was qualified, and yet you used phrases like, if she becomes disruptive, we'll pivot to someone safer. What did you mean by that?" Vincent's jaw clenched. "You're twisting corporate language."
Did you or did you not refer to Ms. Carter as a diversity puppet in a private message to another executive?
Vincent went silent. Camilla held up a printed screenshot. "We have the message, Mr. Laramie." Silent. "Please answer the question," Judge Price said firmly. Vincent looked down. "Yes." Gasps echoed from the courtroom gallery. Barbara shifted in her seat, panic flickering across her features. Janelle didn't move. Camilla turned. No further questions. Next came Barbara's testimony. She took the stand with practiced fragility, voice trembling just enough to earn sympathy from the jurors. Her attorneys had coached her well. "I was scared," she said, clutching her pearls. "I was just asking for decent customer service. I never expected it to become this firestorm. And when you found out Ms. Carter was your superior?" The defense asked gently. "I was shocked," she replied, voice cracking. "I felt attacked, humiliated. And the live stream, I didn't know it would go viral," she sniffled. "I just wanted someone to listen." She paused for dramatic effect. The camera from court TV zoomed in. "I've received threats. My social circle has shunned me. I've lost speaking engagements. All because I expressed a simple concern." But Janelle's team was ready. They didn't fight fire with fire. They fought it with facts. Emails, surveillance footage, testimony. One by one, former employees took the stand. Carmen, the cashier who once feared even speaking up, now sat tall in her court-appropriate blazer, hands folded, but voice firm. I saw Barbara roll her eyes when I offered to bag her groceries. She asked if I could find someone professional. I wasn't even allowed to report it. My shift manager said, "Let it go. It's just her way." Then came Jaden, who confirmed Travis had instructed him to stand near the doors for diversity presence. Then Melissa, who'd been told to tone down her accent despite growing up in Florida. The final blow came from Erica, a former assistant manager terminated months prior. She'd never been mentioned in any internal documents, but Camilla had tracked her down. Erica took the stand and read from her journal entries documenting retaliatory HR moves. "I was fired 2 weeks after I logged a complaint about a white customer calling a black employee a slur. HR told me I had overreacted." She broke down crying. Janelle remained stoic, but her hands tightened in her lap. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was their story too. All the silence, all the suppression, bubbling into daylight. Barbara's legal team scrambled. They tried to discredit witnesses, poke holes in timelines, cast doubt on motivations. But the tide had shifted. The courtroom wasn't just watching. America was watching. Then Camilla stood for final remarks. "What we see here is not a one-time misunderstanding," she said, pacing slowly. "This is the anatomy of systemic erasure. A woman who earned her place only to be framed as a token, a professional, reduced to a disruptive visual, a workplace that failed to protect its employees, choosing optics over integrity. She paused, letting the silence breathe. Barbara Langley is not a victim of injustice. She is a perpetrator of it. And when she couldn't control the narrative, she sued to silence the one who could. She nodded once, then returned to her seat. Judge Price sat still for a moment, then spoke. This court was prepared to rule on a narrow matter of defamation. But due to new evidence presented, namely internal emails suggesting coordinated racial bias, we will be expanding the scope of the case to include workplace discrimination, retaliation, and corporate negligence. Gasps filled the air again. Barbara's face went white. Her attorneys whispered furiously. Judge Price leaned forward, eyes steady. This case is no longer about one woman's complaint. It's about the system she exposed. As the judge slammed her gavel for recess, a court clerk rushed to Camila's side, whispering something into her ear. Camila turned to Janelle, her face grave. They've just issued a federal subpoena. The DOJ is launching a civil rights investigation into Brookridge Market's employment practices. The investigation spread faster than wildfire. What began as a single confrontation in a suburban Brookridge Market had become a national reckoning. Janelle Carter's case had cracked open something far larger, something festering beneath the company's glossy branding and multicultural marketing campaigns. Within days of the DOJ's civil rights investigation going public, complaints began surfacing from every region. Dozens, then hundreds, employees across the country, many who had once whispered their truth into locked suggestion boxes, now stepped forward with names, dates, documentation. I was passed over for promotion 3 times despite leading my team in performance. A customer called me a racial slur. My manager told me to apologize for escalating. I was told not to wear my natural hair if I wanted to be taken seriously. Some testimonies were short, typed hastily from mobile phones. Others came with full incident reports, screenshots, and even old emails that had been quietly saved over the years. Digital scars turned into evidence. The DOJ's task force began cross-referencing internal documents. What they found was damning: systemic negligence, untrained managers, a lack of diversity above the store level, and a pattern of discriminatory complaints being marked closed within 24 hours, with no action taken. Across multiple regions, whistleblowers revealed a corporate directive codenamed Image First, an unofficial practice encouraging the use of racially diverse front-end staff without granting them leadership roles or authority. It was optics as policy, and at the center of it all, even reluctantly, was Janelle. She hadn't asked to be a symbol. She had asked to be heard. But symbols didn't get to choose their spotlight. Her name was now being invoked in union meetings, equity panels, and breaking news alerts. Employee coalitions formed overnight. At the Phoenix branch, workers staged a silent walkout. In New Jersey, Latino and Black staff organized a sit-in inside the break room, holding up signs that read, "More than optics, we are the core." A video of the protest in Oakland went viral. Dozens of employees in uniform standing outside their store in a circle, reading anonymous complaint letters aloud, tears streaking down faces, fists held high. The media couldn't look away anymore. Every major network ran features. Late-night hosts dedicated monologues. Streaming services requested documentary rights. Think pieces filled social feeds, arguing not about if systemic racism existed in the company, but how deep it ran and who let it flourish. Meanwhile, Brookridge Market's public relations team scrambled into damage control. They rolled out carefully worded statements. "We are listening. We value diversity. We are committed to improvement." But for many, it was too late. Customers began organizing boycotts, calling for executive resignations, demanding transparency on leadership demographics. Brand trust fell 26% in 2 weeks. Janelle watched all of this unfold from behind her desk, her inbox overflowing with interview requests, consultant offers, and internal inquiries. One afternoon, her phone buzzed. "Janelle, this is Dana Ellison with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund." Janelle leaned back in her chair, exhausted but intrigued. "Yes, I've seen your name in the reports. We're launching a corporate accountability initiative," Dana said. "Your case is the anchor. We want you to speak at our opening summit, and we'd like to help you draft enforceable policy recommendations for the entire retail sector." Janelle didn't respond immediately. She looked out the window at the same store she had once walked into as a cashier, and now managed as the eye of a national storm. "Let's talk," she finally said. But with every inch of progress came new attacks. Online trolls turned their focus from her professionalism to her personal life. Old social media posts were dissected. A blurry photo from college was circulated with false captions. One blog accused her of race baiting for a payout. Her Wikipedia page was edited and re-edited by strangers. Even allies began to show cracks. Corporate executives who once privately praised her courage now ghosted her in group emails. One regional manager suggested her new equity initiative would scare off conservative investors. The pushback wasn't loud, it was strategic. Delayed approvals, stalled meetings, requests for language softening in her proposals. They were trying to grind her down through polite obstruction. And then came the real shock. Late one night, as she reviewed another round of legal correspondence, her office TV flashed with a breaking news alert. Barbara Langley, under scrutiny for past hate speech allegations. The anchor, poised and grave, detailed the findings of an investigative report from an independent journalist who had received anonymous tips and verified documents. In 2017, Barbara had been recorded shouting racial slurs at a black delivery driver during a dispute at a boutique she managed. In 2019, she had filed a civil suit against a gay black neighbor over a fence height violation, during which she allegedly referred to his family as those people who don't belong here. 3 other former employees from a small business she once co-owned in Savannah came forward detailing hostile racially biased language and sudden terminations. The footage of Barbara from 2017 played grainy, nighttime, her voice unmistakable, slurred, angry. Take your ghetto ass back to wherever you came from. The courtroom gasps from weeks ago now seemed muted in comparison to the wave of disgust sweeping across the country. Public opinion shifted hard. Her lawsuit against Janelle was immediately thrown into question. Her status as a wronged customer dissolved into farce. Social media erupted in fury. Barbara Langley, unmasked. This is who they protected. Justice for Janelle. But Janelle didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She sat alone in her office, watching the footage, feeling nothing but cold clarity. Because the truth was, Barbara hadn't been an anomaly. She had been a symptom. What terrified Janelle more than Barbara's hate was how many people had once protected it, excused it, justified it, because it was convenient, profitable, easy. And now those same people were pretending they never knew her. As Janelle turned off the television, her phone buzzed again, an internal corporate message. Subject line, new executive role clarification, pending vote. She clicked it open. Inside, a proposal to restructure her position, dismantling her direct access to the CEO and splitting her authority across 3 new equity advisors. The motion? Submitted by Vincent Laramie. Seconded by Travis Weller. The email came at dawn. Subject line, next chapter. No body text. No attachments. Just a signed offer letter from the Brookridge Market Board of Directors. Janelle Carter, it read, was being offered a newly created executive title, Senior Vice President of Equity and Ethics, reporting directly to the CEO. National oversight of DI operations, policy enforcement, and culture audits, full authority to shape hiring, retention, and advancement frameworks company-wide. On paper, it was historic, unprecedented, powerful, to many watching from the outside, especially the media. It was a storybook resolution. The black woman once mistaken for a cashier, now elevated to the C-suite, to fix the very system that tried to erase her. The headlines wrote themselves. From targeted to trusted, Janelle Carter named SVP after viral racism trial. Brookridge Market names first black woman to top ethics role. But inside Janelle's chest something twisted. Not pride. Not relief. Something darker. Something wary. Was this redemption or retaliation? In disguise. She sat in her office, fingers resting on the edge of the keyboard, the glow of the screen casting shadows under her tired eyes. The offer letter sat open in one tab. In another, a spreadsheet of employee complaints from the past 18 months. 47, in total. 36 unresolved. 17 listed as not enough evidence. Was this new role a sign of progress or a strategy to silence her with title and applause? Outside her window, Atlanta buzzed with morning movement. Delivery trucks, early walkers, the pulse of a city pretending everything was fine. But inside, Janelle's mind replayed every step that had led her here. The first time she was told her tone was too strong. The first time she was left off a group email. The time her diversity presentation was rescheduled 3 times. then canceled altogether. The time Vincent called her a strong visual leader, not knowing she understood exactly what he meant. The night she watched security footage of Travis handing off something in the shadows of the parking lot, tying him directly to the sabotage attempt. This role wasn't a gift. It was a gamble, one the board was hoping she'd accept so they could parade progress while dodging accountability. Still, something tugged at her. That afternoon, her sister brought her niece, Nia, to visit the store. Nia was 10 soft curls, a tooth missing, eyes like questions waiting to be answered. She stood in front of Janelle's desk, wide-eyed. "Mom says you're like, in charge now?" Janelle smiled. "Something like that." Nia looked down at her shoes. "Does that mean no one else will be treated like that again?" The words hit harder than any boardroom insult ever had. Janelle knelt, meeting her eyes. "I don't know if I can stop all of it, but I promise I'll make it harder for them to get away with it." Nia nodded slowly. "Good. 'Cause my teacher said it was just a misunderstanding when a boy in class called me a monkey. But I knew it wasn't." Something cracked inside Janelle then. Not her resolve. Her restraint. That night, she logged into her laptop and opened a blank document. Title: Racial Equity Framework. Brookridge. She began writing. Policy recommendations. System reviews. Mandated anti-bias training for every level of management. A whistleblower protection line outside of HR. Real diversity metrics tied to leadership bonuses. Cross-regional audits. Community liaison. A leadership mentorship program for frontline workers of color. She wrote for 4 hours without stopping. This wasn't a PR stunt. Not if she didn't let it be. She could make it real. Not just a title, but a reckoning. By midnight, she had mapped out the foundation for a 10-year transformation plan. She closed the laptop, stretched, and walked toward the office door. That's when she saw it. An envelope, plain and unmarked, slid halfway under the door. Janelle bent down slowly, her fingers trembling slightly, as she picked it up. No name, no return address, no postage. Inside was a single photograph. A picture of her house, taken from the street at night. The front porch light glowed in the image, casting long shadows on the grass. Her car was visible in the driveway, drawn over the photo in thick red marker, an X over the front door. No message, no demands, just that silent, burning threat. Janelle stared at it for a long time, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs. Just as she reached for her phone to call security, her email pinged with a new message. The sender was anonymous. The subject line read, "You think this is over?" Inside, a file attachment labeled Carter Family History Purge List, the TE hit, and it was beginning to download. The crowd began to form before sunrise. By 7:00 a.m., hundreds had gathered outside the Brookridge Market flagship store, spilling into the parking lot and onto the adjacent sidewalks. The air vibrated with chants, signs bobbed in the summer heat, and the hum of anticipation grew louder with every passing minute. "We stand with Janelle. Protect Black leadership. No more silent suffering." The protest had started online, a trending hashtag, a few viral tweets, but it quickly transformed into something bigger. Workers from nearby stores called in sick en masse. Customers who once browsed these aisles now lined the pavement, holding cardboard signs and megaphones. Union leaders, local pastors, civil rights organizers, teenagers, grandparents, even former employees who had once been pushed out quietly were there, wearing shirts that read, "You won't erase me." News vans circled the lot. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Reporters from CNN, MSNBC, and BBC stood in designated media zones. One anchor whispered into her mic, "What we're witnessing is not just protest. It's a cultural uprising, rooted in one woman's refusal to stay quiet." And at the center of it all, Janelle Carter stood inside the store's glass double doors, watching. She hadn't planned to speak. The board had advised her to observe respectfully, hoping her silence would cool the firestorm. But Janelle had no interest in extinguishing a flame that finally illuminated the truth. By 9:00 a.m., someone passed her a microphone. The crowd hushed. Janelle stepped onto the small portable stage near the store's entrance. The podium was makeshift, built overnight by local volunteers. The banner behind her read, "Justice isn't optics. It's accountability." She gripped the mic tightly, her breath steady but electric. "This isn't about me," she began, her voice carrying like a storm gathering momentum. "This is about the Black workers who smile through pain every day, who've been told their hair isn't professional, their tone is too aggressive, their presence is too loud, A roar of applause erupted. This is about the people who clock in on time, stay late, hit every metric and still get told they're not leadership material. About the ones who've been made invisible, until they're needed to make a brochure look diverse. The crowd shouted her name. Reporters jotted every word. Cameras zoomed in. Janelle paused, scanning the faces before her. She spotted Carmen, Melissa, Rico, even Jaden, who stood with his arm around his mother. Staff who had once been silenced were now leading chants. She continued, I was offered a title meant to silence me. I took it, and rewrote the job description. The audience leaned in. Starting today, we are enacting 5 immediate reforms across all Brookridge locations. She held up her fingers, counting each one. 1 mandatory anti-bias training, led by independent experts, not corporate PR firms. 2 promotion audits to ensure equity, not favoritism. 3. A transparency dashboard where employees can track internal complaints and their resolutions. 4. A new whistleblower protection line, monitored outside of HR channels. And 5. A commitment to review all previously closed racial complaints from the last 3 years, with third-party oversight.
The crowd exploded.
Tears ran down Carmen's face. Melissa clutched her clipboard like it was a trophy. A man in the back whispered, We've waited so long for someone to say it. Janelle's voice softened. These aren't slogans. These are systems. And we're not just reforming one store. We're rebuilding a culture. The chants grew louder. Helicopters dipped lower. Security looked overwhelmed, but respectful. As Janelle stepped down from the podium, overwhelmed but resolute, the crowd surged forward, surrounding her with cheers and gratitude. And then, from somewhere near the back, a voice pierced the celebration like a blade. She's still here. The crowd turned, confused. A few people looked around, trying to see who had spoken. The voice came again, louder. She's inside. She's hiding. Janelle's heart lurched. She turned to security. Who? One of the guards leaned into his radio, listening intently. His face shifted. Janelle followed his gaze back toward the store. There, behind the tinted glass of the second-floor manager's lounge, stood Barbara Langley. Uninvited, unannounced. She wasn't wearing her courtroom ivory blouse this time. She wore all black. Her face was partially hidden behind large sunglasses, but her stance was unmistakable, defiant, unbothered. Janelle felt her stomach drop. How had she gotten inside? Security began to move, but the protest crowd grew restless. People began murmuring. Reporters raised their cameras. A few chanted, "No more Karens." Others shouted for her removal. Barbara stood perfectly still. Then, as if aware she was being watched, she raised her phone and began filming from behind the glass. Janelle stepped forward, signaling for calm. No one touch her. Let security handle it. But the crowd surged. Reporters ran toward the building. Employees tried to hold the line. Tension rose like static in the air before a lightning strike. And then, Barbara lifted a sign. She pressed it against the window, handwritten in red ink. You can fire me, but you'll never be one of them. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Security pushed into the building. Minutes later, Barbara was escorted out, handcuffed, not for violence but for trespassing on private property during an active restraining order. Janelle stood still, watching the scene unfold with eerie clarity. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the horrifying familiarity of it all. Barbara wasn't alone. There were more like her, more who believed what she believed, but didn't have her audacity, more who would smile to her face and plot her erasure behind closed doors. As the crowd began to settle again, Janelle's assistant tapped her shoulder. Media wants a follow-up comment. And, there's someone from Homeland Security waiting in the conference room. They say it's related to cyber threats. The one targeting your family. Janelle looked toward the entrance, heart pounding. A tall man in a gray suit waited inside the store, holding a briefcase and a badge. He didn't smile. And in his hand was a folder labeled, Domestic Watch List, Category Red, Internal Threats Involving Public Civil Leaders. The packed courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Judge Helena Price took her seat again. The defendant, Barbara Langley, once so composed and commanding, now looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped beneath the weight of the case, her once pearl blouse replaced by sterile gray court attire. Judge Price cleared her throat. This is the verdict on count 1, filing a false hate report and inciting racial harassment. Barbara's face went pale. Her legal team shifted uneasily. She is hereby found guilty. There was no gasp, No gasp from supporters because no one was left supporting her. Instead, silence stretched. Judge Price continued. Count 2 is dismissed in light of corroborating evidence of systemic bias in company leadership. However, the aggravating factor is the misuse of legal process to intimidate a black executive, fulfilling her professional duties. Barbara lowered her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not performance tears, but actual regret. Judge Price leaned forward. Sentencing is as follows. A fine of $50,000 to the court, mandatory community service, and barred from filing future civil suits regarding Brookridge Market or its employees. The court also refers the case to a state commission for potential hate speech enforcement. Barbara's defense attorney stammered protest but found no purchase. Janelle listened, silent but present. The verdict was more than symbolic. It was acknowledgement. Outside the courthouse, Chance resumed. Justice for Janelle. Integrity, not optics. Her equity initiative, once a leaked draft, was now moving through Brookridge Market's legal and executive channels. Slides were sharpened, policies refined, metrics built into compensation plans. Every step of the plan had been vetted by independent auditors and civil rights lawyers. Within weeks, Janelle's racial equity framework debuted externally as the company's official policy. Headlines followed. New national DI standards set by Janelle Carter's model at Brookridge. Corporate reform, or PR. Debate raged, but Janelle had built a structure designed to survive skepticism. Promotions began rolling out. Carmen became assistant merchandiser. Melissa earned full-time management status. Jaden moved into regional outreach. Across 5 pilot locations, Black and brown employees were promoted in accordance with transparent reviews and bias check protocols. Brookridge Market issued a formal apology under the banner to the employees and communities we overlooked, acknowledging systemic failures and pledging to maintain independent oversight for 5 years. At universities across the country, business schools began examining the case. Janelle's materials were downloaded tens of thousands of times. She received emails from MBA professors, thanking her for her authenticity, calling her a case study in ethical leadership. 6 months after the verdict, Janelle returned to Macon, Georgia, this time not undercover or anxious, but intentional. She walked into the foster home where she'd once lived, the one that smelled of bleach and secondhand mattresses. Warm afternoon light shone through dusty windows. She spoke to those residents, kids aged 8 to 14, some shy, some bold, all curious. I know what it feels like to be overlooked, she told them. To have people tell you where you belong before you even speak your name. She handed over a scholarship check, enough to cover their summer camp expenses for the year, and a promise to return annually. A quiet gift, but one built on doors she had opened, that never closed for her. On her drive back, the radio played a segment about corporate America's reckoning with racial equity. They named Brookridge as a model, her model. She allowed herself a small smile, but she didn't relax. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a bright but reserved voice said, Ms. Carter, this is Claire Harrison from Unity Brands. We saw your initiative, watched it grow. We want you to lead our nationwide transformation. Janelle's breath caught. Another crest of responsibility, another platform. She looked out her car window as Atlanta passed by below, towering buildings framed in golden evening light. This was redemption. But it had come at a price. Threats, lawsuits, corporate sabotage, and weeks of emotional strain. It had tested every boundary she'd ever been forced into, and every barrier she'd broken through. But the model she built, the team she uplifted, the children she reached, it all proved one thing. Injustice demands accountability. Change demands courage. She nodded slowly into the phone. I'm in. As she hung up, her phone pinged with a message from her attorney. Subject line subpoena update. Brookridge board meeting minutes. Attached a document dated 6 months ago, in which several board members including Vincent Laramie, recommended termination of your position, effective immediately, days before the protest. But someone had edited out that agenda from the publicly released minutes.
Now it was back on the record.
No one should have to earn their dignity at the cost of their silence. Janelle stood up when silence was safer, so others wouldn't have to. If her fight moved you, if her courage reminded you of someone you